Let's talk about death, y'all. What's up, guys? My name's Hayden Murphy, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy, who I almost always want to keep calling Leo Toy Story, unfortunately. It keeps slipping out, and it might happen in this video. You are warned.
You have been warned.
Now, this is not a normal sci-fi fantasy book like I normally like to read, but I have to give you a little bit of a preface of the journey that got me to read this book. I started going down a YouTube rabbit hole probably about a year ago on the Fabergé eggs, okay? If you don't know anything about them, I'm not going to go into super detail in this video. You can look them up yourself. Just type in Fabergé eggs history, and I was enamored. I was fascinated. And it ties directly into Russian history. And I came to the realization, I don't know anything about Russian history. Now, I don't know much about a lot of history, but this fascinated me by the mindset and the culture of what they experienced in their history. So then I started looking into some, famous literature by them, and I stumbled across Leo Tolstoy. Then you come to find out and realize he is known as one of the most, famous classic literature authors of all time. And I bought, in one of my book haul videos I've shown, I bought War and Peace and I bought Anna Karenina. But both of those books are like massive behemoths of books. Then I also found this little tiny novella written by him. It's not even really 100 pages. And I thought, let me go ahead and dip my toe into that Tolstoy, get a little taste and see what his writing style is like, how he writes his prose and everything like that, to see if it's even worth me continuing in those behemoths of books. I'm glad to say this book made me realize it is. There's a reason why I think he's known as one of the greatest authors of all time. And even though he writes in Russian and this is translated to English, I can only assume that the translators are still following the poetic voice of Tolstoy himself. His prose is really, really good, and you can just tell when you're reading something, you can just tell, yeah, this has stood the test of time, and this is why so many people love him, and why it's regarded and revered as a classic, and why he's regarded as a classic author even too. This definitely encouraged me to jump in at some point in time to his behemoths of books, to where, because his writing style was so good, and this was not even 100 pages, I was like, man, I want more. Give me more. I want to dive in and just soak and sit in the words that are Leo Tolstoy, Oh,
yes!
So this book highlights the importance of not just literature, but also why books have an advantage over movies in some regards. See, the beauty of books is that you can get into the minds of your characters. You can see and sit in the psyche of individuals. You cannot get that to the same extent in a movie as you can in a book. If someone were to do what he did in this book in a movie or a television show, we would be bored to death. We would be like, oh my gosh, he's monologuing. This is so not realistic. He's not doing this. Because the majority of this book is literally just a man on his deathbed. But you're in his thoughts. You're in his mind. You're understanding what his thought process is going on as he is experiencing a fatal medical issue. Spoiler alert, he dies.
Spoiler alert.
I don't know if the title gave it away or what, but this guy, Ivan Ilyich, dies in this book. Okay, so sorry to spoil that for you if the title itself already didn't do that. This book is not something necessarily you spoil. It's something you read that makes you ponder the questions of life and death. What is it? Have you wasted your life? Things like that. But it also shows how people react to other people's deaths. And it's fascinating because the book starts off with his funeral and primarily focuses on the point of view from his friends. But yes, this book starts with his funeral, and it's very interesting because while the bulk of this book does focus on his psyche and his thought process, we get to see how other people react to death in general, and we can put ourselves in the shoes of these individuals. Primarily his like work accomplices that he has known for his whole life and has come to know them as friends. And it is very fitting and interesting to see how they handle themselves during this funeral, which I'm sure if any of you guys have been to a funeral, then you know there's one of two things. Either you are super close to this person and you are just bombarded with grief and sadness because you've lost this person who is very close to you, or you're a little bit on the outside. Even if you're very close friends or something, you know, or work accomplices, let's say that, you're kind of on the outside where you're just kind of like, you know, this is sad. This is a shame. I can't believe we lost this guy. All right, what are we eating for lunch, guys?
I'm hungry. I'm gonna go and get something to eat.
What are we doing after this, you know? And that's kind of the manner in which this funeral is treated by certain individuals, or at least the individuals that we focus on in the short little time in the beginning. And it really is interesting because it points out what so many of us view about death. We view death in two different lenses. It is either you're thinking about death all the time and it's this terrifying, horrifying boogeyman, or you're not thinking about it at all. It's this far-off, far-fetched idea that is nowhere close to you at all and will never come and get you. Death is something other people experience, not me. It's never going to come and get me. And this book definitely highlights the psyche of both instances, because even though the bulk of this novella is told through like the mind or point of view of Ivan Ilyich, who is dying on his deathbed, he shared the same viewpoint before his untimely demise. He did not view death as anything to be thought of. And it really makes you reflect and realize that even though he is thinking of these things on his deathbed, it is a good reminder for us, because either you don't ever really think about these or you think about it too much. And I can honestly say this book, I think, needs to be read by anybody and everybody sooner rather than later, because this is a kind of book that makes you contemplate and realize that the very questions that are brought up in this book, there is at least one or more than one question that every single person watching this video has had at some point in time. And it makes you reflect on your own life. It makes you realize, you know, what have I done with my life? Have I done enough? Am I doing the right things? Was all of it for nothing? What is life? What is death? And all of those questions and more get touched upon in this novella. Now, it's not here to give you an answer. It's just an interesting struggle in the mind of one individual while he is on his deathbed. But because he is on his deathbed, it reminds the reader that we don't want to have to wait so long to encounter those questions when we're laying in our deathbed knowing we're going to die. Like, these are questions that you should probably ask yourself earlier rather than later. Now, there are Christian themes and overtones primarily near the very end. And I realized, you know, that even if you aren't a Christian, you should still read this book, because he's not preaching to anybody. He's not trying to tell you, you need to get saved before you die, okay? This is just something that this specific character is encountering. But it did make me want to dig a little further into Tolstoy's history himself. And all I did was look up a single Google search. So please, I am not an expert in this, but I did have to ask, like, hey, is Tolstoy a Christian? And the answer was, it's debatable. A lot of people are up in debate for it, because he wrote Anna Karenina, and there was a 9-year gap where he did not write anything. And the only thing he produced after that 9 years was this tiny little, less than 100 page novella. And I think it said he was like in his 70s as he wrote this book. And I think it said that he potentially got saved during that time. So you can imagine a 70-year-old who has had a successful life, I imagine, as an author, and who knows what kind of things he's experienced in his life. Again, I have no idea. But that he is probably, you know, realizing he has less years ahead of him than he has behind him. and he's probably encountering a lot of the questions that are proposed in this book. And, you know, that does happen to a lot of people. They find religion as they start to realize their own mortality. Now, again, there's debate as to whether he's a Christian or not, and I'm not going to go into that in this discussion. Regardless of whether he really was or not, you can tell that he was questioning those things in his life, and it shows in this work. That alone, the fact that he had written behemoths of books, and that this book, after a 9-year hiatus of writing, was less than 100 pages, and he was able to pack so much meaning, so much questioning, so much impactful statements, and, you know, thought-provoking statements in this tiny little novella speaks to the volume of how great of an author he is. I would highly recommend anyone and everyone go and read this. And I would even say, I don't even think you have to go and buy the book to read it. I'm sure that there is like a free text version online that you could just download the PDF and read it. It's not a long read. It's very, very quick, but it will have you thinking and just acknowledging and reflecting in your own personal life. And I think that's a good thing, especially in an age where we have, you know, media reflecting death in like, you know, one of two ways. Either it's really silly and goofy, like I think of like that Cartoon Network show with the Grim Reaper.
That's not Santa, you stooge. That's the Grim Reaper.
And they just make it as like a funny little thing. Or I think of it as like, you know, the boogeyman, kind of like how they do with Final Destination. Like, oh, death's gonna get you. And so we have two reactions to it of like, you know, we laugh at it or we are horrified of it. And I think you'll come to realize, especially if you're a Christian, I would say, because you would identify with some of the things specifically in the end of this book, that death is something that will come to each and every one of us.
The Meaning of Life, Part 7, Death.
And how we react to it and how we respond to it matters. Not just by the person experiencing death, but the people who are impacted by said death. I have to say, I have been impacted by lots of death. Early on in my life, I'm 31, you know, I've experienced, you know, lots of, I don't know, I don't want to be over dramatic in this video, but, you know, there's been some traumatic things I've experienced, you know, already, and lots of people have, and it's how do you cope with that? How do you reason with that? And you can either confront it head on or run away from it. Unfortunately, I feel like, you know, just like all of us, we probably do a little bit of both. We run away from it in some aspects, and we confront it in others. And this book really does make you question your own response to death, but also life. Because so many people, just like the main character, focus on the wrong things in life, I believe. They want to focus on just, you know, their career and their jobs, and they forgo their families and forsake their families and not view the family and other things as the important things in life. They view what society tells us that is important and prioritize those things, and then by the end of their lives they realize their life has been empty and meaningless because they prioritize and focus on the things that society and the world tells you are important rather than the things that are truly meaningful and lasting. And that really is the message you get from this book. Let's focus on the meaningful and lasting things that will, you know, go on beyond our own mortal lives. There's going to be days that happen after we are on this earth, just like there were days before we were on this earth. And it really makes you question that. And I was really impacted by this book. It was really awesome. And I, again, think that you guys need to read it. But that's all I can really think of to say about this little tiny novella, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. I want to know, have you guys read it? I know my normal audience mostly reads sci-fi fantasy, but again, I think that it'll be beneficial for you guys to read this as well. It really is impactful, and I am a sucker for classics, okay? Sue me.
No, don't sue me. That's the opposite of the point that I am trying to make.
But let me know in the comments if you have read it. I'd like to know what your thoughts are, because I think it could provoke a really profound discussion on what this book discusses. So do me a favor, drop me a like if you found anything redeemable in this video. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye.